start the Capital Program Oversight Committee meeting. Do we have any public comments?
We have two public speakers, Jason Pinero and Omar Vera. Jason.
Good afternoon, Joe and Ronnie. I'm gonna be pretty short. It is one simple question. Why is it that all the projects in 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1 is delayed? That's my biggest question. And why is it that we have to wait until November of this year to see CBTC fully implemented on the 7th? Why is it that we have to deal with these delays and throwing money like we was like a tree? The MTA is not like having money that they could take out from a tree. I hope that we could reform how we spend money and how we manage to complete the projects on time and within budget. That's all I have to say.
Omar Vera.
Good afternoon, MTA CPOC committee. Let me start by apologizing that I wasn't here for the finance committee because I was downstairs admiring the beauty of the MTA double-decker bus. And thanks for showing me the photos of the older double-decker buses. I had no idea, Mr. Chairman, but thank you so much for those. And now on to business. Like Jason said earlier, I'm a little concerned with like the number of delays with key capital projects, but we must always aim to strive better. And I like the progress, at least some progress that you made regarding East Side Access. I suggested time and again to like make to create something similar to the 2nd Avenue Subway Information Center in regards to East Side Access project, and everything else seems pretty shipshape. And I appreciate the enhanced station initiative that you've been doing on the Central Park West line on 110th, 163rd, and now it's about to come to 72nd Street in about a week or so, or 2 weeks, I should say. All right. Without further ado, I yield back the balance of my time, and have a good one.
Thank you. There are no other public comments, so moving along with the meeting, the approval of the minutes from our March 19, 2018 meeting. I'll move them. Do we have a second? We do. Are there any questions, changes, comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Don, the committee work plan?
No changes to the work plan this month.
Great. No changes to the work plan. So the quarterly capital construction company update. Jano?
Mr. Chairman, I think, as you know, my plan is to give a full report on East Side Access budget and schedule today, so let me start. Members of the committee, in October, I reported to you on my initial evaluation of the East Side Access project and made 6 recommendations about how we needed to change the project. Today, in response to your request, I'm going to give you a report on my updated view of the budget and schedule situation. It's going to be a roughly 20-minute presentation, so apologize for the length. But here's the conclusion, which is that we can and should keep the 2022 revenue service opening date, but the project is going to require more money, and let me tell you why. First of all, I do want to underscore that there is significant progress and that this project is growing, in my mind, is growing in importance. We've learned from Gateway and the whole response to Sandy about the necessity of having duplicative cross-river traffic. This project does for the East River what the Gateway project will do for the Hudson River, and I think we're fortunate to have it underway. As difficult as this project has been and continues to be, and notwithstanding some of the disappointments, of this project, having it underway at this time when we see our brethren struggling to figure out how to accomplish Gateway is I think, a significant advantage to the region and to the MTA. What's going on? Many of you have recently been to visit the East Side Access Project, and I thank you for making the time. The terminal itself is really starting to take shape as a world-class train terminal. This is an 8-track train terminal, the biggest passenger railroad facility, I believe, to open since the 1930s. And you can see what kind of place it's going to become. There's some images of the platforms under construction, the precast concrete that makes up the ceiling and much of the structure is 75% done, so the project is moving forward. The rails are being placed inside the tunnels from Queens, and that's going very, very well. And as many of you saw, that the escalators, which take you from the concourse level just below the existing Metro North station down to this 150 feet lower level below Grand Central, are the escalators are about halfway done. We rode on one of them recently, and it's obviously a significant milestone. But where the action continues to be, to a great extent, is the upgrading of the existing infrastructure in Harold Interlocking. This is the area next to and overlapping with so-called Sunnyside Yards in Queens, which is the busiest passenger rail intersection in the United States, with over 800 trains a day. And as I said, I think of that as and it serves roughly the same number of passengers as the Gateway project. So another analogy to be borne in mind. But Harold, which is to a great extent was Penn Central property, and for the last 50 years Amtrak territory to a great extent, it hasn't been kept up. And in fact, the infrastructure dates much of it from the Penn Central Railroad days. And that's an image of one area of Harold Interlocking before. And this is an image of what it is today. And the reason for the labeling is that it shows you how much has had to be replaced and upgraded and modernized. And a lot of those labels you see have the word catenary on them. And catenary is what powers the Amtrak system. And it just shows the extent to which this huge investment by the MTA, without investment from Amtrak of $1.5 billion all told, roughly, is benefiting Amtrak as well as our own riders. Just a little more detail. I'm not going to go through it, but it just gives you, this bar chart gives you a sense of the scope of the Harold Interlocking work, all the different elements, the number of them, and also how far along we are in producing those changes and delivering that infrastructure. I especially emphasize at the bottom of the chart the cutover of the signals. That is a huge milestone for Long Island Railroad, for our entire system, because once the signal cutover, which is, taking place right now on a weekend by weekend basis, once that's accomplished, you will for the first time be able to connect a train from any Long Island branch into any of the East River tunnels, which gives us much more flexibility in the event of service disruptions and the ability to respond to problems on the line. So that's each of these elements of improvements is delivering for the public as they are installed, but in particular the signal cutover, which is, as I said, the first time we talk about it in the subway system, the need to have modern signals. This is going to be a fully microprocessor-based signal system in lieu of the old relay-based systems, and that's a milestone. What I talked about back in October, I just want to update you on what's been done. We talked about the need for a new and more detailed schedule. Well, we've got a schedule now that has moved from roughly 8,500 separate activities to 45,000 activities, and that's because we are now introducing into the schedule all of those elements and steps that could disrupt or affect the progress of work. So that means that every change order, which is in fact a critical path issue, is going to, in most cases, is in there. It means that procurement of materials, the need to have access, even training of personnel is all in there so that people are attending to every issue that could affect the progress of work. So that has been done. In addition, We've created an organization, I talked to you about this, that is empowered within Eastside Access, which is a huge project. We've created an organization that is empowered to direct work. Remember, there are 50 separate contracts. Not all of them are operational, but there are 50 separate contracts. So each of them is following their own schedule and milestones and timetable, and they're trying to get the contractor to move forward. But this group is empowered to say, this is the change order that needs to move first. This is the work that needs to go forward, even if everybody is clamoring for support from the railroads or whatever. So this is, I think, an important step forward that empowers a group of people to decide how to prioritize work in the interest of advancing the schedule most effectively. We talked about empowering our construction managers, our project team, most of them consultants. We've done that. We're making it a lot easier for them to move smaller change orders without a ton of process. And in fact, we're introducing into the contract with our construction management team, which is in an option period, incentives and disincentives for performance outcomes. This is something that I think is really needed because these are consultants. This is our project management team, but somehow or another there isn't, I think they get paid for time, or their companies get paid for time, irrespective of outcome. I think we need to do that now on this project and do it more generally. Change orders. There's a huge backlog of change orders on this project, and one of the things that we've done is altered the change order process to go from 11 separate approvals needed to get a change order through to 4, and from 17 points of handover in that process to 4. All of these approvals and handovers are the result of well-intended efforts to prevent things from being done wrongly or inappropriately, and with the goal originally to protect the public. Problem is, when you create so much process, you end up hurting the results that we all want. And I think we have taken a step back and looked at it and re-engineered the change order process. The goal is to cut the time of processing down by 80+%. I told you I wanted the Long Island Railroad personnel, and Phil Eng and I have started to talk about this. It's time for the railroad to own this project. Obviously, MTACC is performing it as their developer, but they're going to own this terminal. They're going to operate this terminal, and we need them to be inside the project more aggressively and more in greater numbers. So we took the folks outside the Long Island Railroad who are working on the project. They had a special projects group. They've come inside the Eastside Access office, and Pat, before he left, actually made some changes at the top of the management to that group. So we have some very capable people who I think everybody in all those organizations is delighted to be working with, running the Long Island Railroad side of this project, and I think that's going to be important. Most important, I talked to you about the major risk to this project is systems. There are 29 separate systems controlling security, communications, signaling, the HVAC in the terminals, the climate control, everything under the sun, and they're all interlinked. And getting systems online, if you're a developer, you know it's not the physical construction, even engineering feats like tunnel boring that can kill you in the end. It's the systems. And so I think I spoke about this in October. We really need to start systems testing right now. You heard it this morning in discussion of the PTC project, just what systems bugs can do to a major project schedule. We have to avoid that, and that means testing starting now. It means taking each piece of each system and testing it, and then connecting it to another section and connecting it to other systems in a very longer and more methodical way than merely building them all and hoping that when you flick the switch, it's going to work. Yes, Andrew.
I'm sorry. Do the tracks exist already from the 63rd Street Tunnel to the Harold Interlocking?
Not all of them, but the construction of those tracks is well underway. And we're at the point where one of the tunnels is actually you're going to start moving material. You're going to lose the ability to drive through those tunnels, and we're going to be moving people on these rail cars pretty soon. Moving equipment on rail cars pretty soon. So systems. So the goal that I had and the conclusion I came to is we need to start systems testing earlier. And part of the benefit of doing this, frankly, is to create the momentum and the teamwork, because there's so much repetitive testing. There are literally thousands of tests that need to go on. And the way you defeat the things that could delay this project is you get that teamwork and that process going effectively. And we're going to start right now systems testing, and we have actually started to work with the contractors to make it happen. Yeah.
On that testing, once you go live, you're going to get on these multitude of pieces, you're going to get at different times new releases of the platforms and the software that are all integrating. Are you ultimately layering these different system tests and test case scenarios into some automated scripted testing tool that you can use in a non-production environment so that post go live, or you don't have to answer this now if you don't know it, but can we
I'd
look,
rather do a little research on
yeah,
this.
can we look into that? Because that
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
be crippling after you go live with that many different pieces that are all have integration points. And it's a lot easier to codify those tests into an automated tool now than it will be after you go live.
Point taken. It's, you know, we have, there's a lot more territory where you have to integrate. I mean, just the geography is so large. I mean, most of those systems have their analogies in the Second Avenue system of one kind or another, but the geography is so large. And you're also reporting to 4 different control centers, which is an additional layer of complexity for East Side access. So it's going to be complicated. It's where most of the risk starts. If I can move on quickly, one variable that I don't think I've made progress on is, frankly, that we need to address in order to bring this project to conclusion is the Amtrak issue. And I've talked about the scope of what we're doing that benefits Amtrak, but I think we've also told you again and again that in order to do work in the Harold interlocking area, you need, in many, many cases, Amtrak to actually perform the work themselves if it's on the catenary, or if you're within 15 feet of Amtrak facilities, you need Amtrak access and protection. And to date, we haven't, you know, this problem has gone on, and it's actually been getting worse. In recent months, it's gotten worse since the beginning of this year. Many of us felt that it was going to get better after last summer when Amtrak had their huge work in Penn Station. It got better for a month or so, and then it started sliding back. And there's, you know, had some significant effects. Let me just take you through one episode, which I think is representative of the bigger phenomenon, but it's pretty small and pretty simple, which is we have 300 poles, catenary poles that need to be installed throughout Harold interlocking. So and they're spread throughout the interlocking. So whenever we get an opportunity to work in a certain area, because we don't know where we're going to have access again, we grab it and we do utility poles. These are huge poles. They're 40 feet tall. They're designed to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds. They're 30 feet deep in their foundations. So, you know, it's a significant undertaking. In one case, we had 30 poles in the midday storage yard that we said, actually it's 21, I believe. Don't want to get my numbers wrong. Yeah. In the midday storage yard that we needed to get done. Amtrak swore up and down they would support the work, but after, you know, in the 5 stages of work, after we installed the new foundations, installed the new catenary structure, they were unable to provide the resources, the people, to actually move the catenary wire, which serves them. And the result of that was that for just that small piece of work, instead of, you know, a 20-week process, we ended up with 55 weeks, 7 change orders, 3 contracts had to be resequenced, 6 design changes. And I'm telling you this long story only to show you that even in cases where you're doing small work, pretty simple work, when you get into dispute with, you know, with Amtrak because they're unable to provide the resources, you can really kill the schedule and with it the budget, because the change orders follow. More broadly, as I said, the Amtrak work that they're doing themselves is at about less than half of plan for the last year. And in fact, they're doing even worse on the access and protection front. In fact, I've written Amtrak recently a couple letters which highlight a whole mess of stuff, but we're definitely having a disagreement. But most recently, you know, we started out being able to expect that we were going to get 24 linemen 24 linemen. This is an agreement back in 2013. And in 2016, they were at 9.2 linemen per day, and now we're at 4.5 this year. So we're like, you know, we're like at 20% of where we were supposed to be in terms of electric traction power support in Harold Interlocking. So what do?
Yeah,
We
wondering what their response is to this.
Well, their response is, honestly, their response is, we got a lot of projects, and it's not our, and we're very busy, and you're late, and it's not our fault. And my response to them is, no, we have specific agreements. And last I checked, I'm a mostly reformed lawyer, but last I checked, you know, I'm too busy to perform the terms of a contract. Doesn't cut it in the United States. So
Plus, then you could easily argue that the Northeast Corridor, of which this is an important part, is their most important place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're definitely having a huge disagreement with Amtrak, and I hope we're going to work it through. These are, you know, in fairness, the new president, the new CEO of Amtrak, a guy named Richard Anderson, who came from Delta, has actually said to us, he met with Joe and Ronnie and myself and Pat Foy, and he said, I recognize that we need to fix this problem, and here's some steps I'm going to take. Now, that's great. The problem is we have years when nobody did anything along those lines. So we've been suggesting, Andrew, we've been suggesting for years that they do more recruiting. We offered to pay them, help them pay premiums to electric traction power linemen. They turned us down. So now is the time that they have to address the problems urgently and help us to get this project
So
done.
hey, Jano, so I'd like to jump in here because I guess I'm a little amazed. I know a lot of history of this with Amtrak, and I'm amazed now. I mean, there's always someone to blame for things going wrong here. It's the city, it's Con Ed, now it's Amtrak. I mean, I have some awareness of their response, and I don't think you're characterizing it entirely fairly. I just have to say, I think there's another side to the story. I mean, I think to hear Amtrak say it, they urged this agency for many years to hire private contractors, to bring Long Island Railroad. I mean, I think there's kind of two sides to the story.
Private contractors, they turn around and say we can't do it because of their own union rules. So
All right, well, they sort of say the opposite, so-
They speak with forked tongue.
Yeah, I can actually respond to that.
I mean, I feel like, you know, again, it's like there's always seems to be a lot of other people to blame for things going wrong here, and it's like I feel like Amtrak's limitations are well known, and I'm shocked we're sort of suddenly this project is another $1 billion over price tag, and suddenly it's all Amtrak's fault. I mean, the limitations of Amtrak are well known, Jano. You know them. And I think if you look back on the contractual arrangements, I know you guys are saying you're going to sue them, but that seems like you're not going to get anywhere with a lawsuit. I mean, I feel like I think the main problem is there's an incredible shortage of the kind of electrical track workers that are needed for all the projects in the New York region right now. And I don't see how, frankly, kind of blaming it on Amtrak is going to solve it.
Well, we offered, and it's been true for some time, to use, if they couldn't fill their own thing, the groups of people that they had agreed to provide, and they did agree to provide it, Polly. So, I can't accept the idea that they can agree to provide it, but we should just release them from that obligation when there's so much money on the line. But be that as it may, we offered historically to provide, to figure out a system where Long Island Railroad professionals could back them up, retirees, Metro North, even private sector safety certified folks, and there was no response.
Well, I'd be really, because I've seen Amtrak's response to one of your letters, and they say they've been proactive in seeking alternative approaches and repeatedly recommended that the MTA construction company and its affiliate redress this via blah, 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 suggesting that MTACC secure services of qualified electric traction contractor or reassign Long Island Railroad Metro North. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're just completely making this up.
Let me just point something out. Look at the access and protection numbers. If we were to do as they said, so they want, what they're saying is you should have gone ahead and had a fight with our unions, even though we weren't willing to, and have a dispute which, even though they didn't get labor clearance. So if we had done, if we were doing what they said, we still have the problem. They have to provide access and protection for our private sector contractors in the scenario you're describing, and look at their performance. I mean, their performance is woeful. We're at 16 on average out of 6 out of 16.
But were you saying, Jenna, we didn't want to hire outside contractors because we didn't want to fight with Amtrak?
No.
Unions?
We hire outside contractors all the time. What they're saying is that we should go in and use outside contractors on work that the Amtrak's unions would have claim as their own. And in fact, in the meeting that we had with Richard Anderson, he acknowledged that he needed to renegotiate those contracts. So what they're saying is that we should have showed up in violation of all of the historical jurisdiction practice in Harold interlocking with private sector contractors to do Amtrak direct work. And you know what? It's not such a crazy idea if we could get Amtrak labor clearance, but they haven't provided, and even more important, if we were to do it, there's no evidence that they can provide the access and protection either. So I take your point that it may be that there are disagreements about what the effective strategy is, but the key point is that we've offered time and again to try to pursue some of these strategies with them, and so far have been unsuccessful.
All right, well, I mean, so they would say the same, I guess, and I guess they mentioned just the projects they're working on in addition to East Side Access, loop track upgrades, westbound bypass, eastbound reroute track, Moynihan. I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean, I feel like we're all sitting here bashing Amtrak, but I don't think that's, I'm not saying there aren't some things they can be doing better, but to me, when I see a project that's gone up by $1 billion, I feel like we should be in problem-solving mode and not Amtrak bashing mode. To pretend that it's all just like if Amtrak lacks the will, that there isn't sort of, I think, tremendous pressures on them from a whole bunch of projects in this region, a real dearth of the kind of electrical workers that we need, and obviously a need to sit down together and work this out. I mean, I just really disagree with this approach of bashing them. I think it seems sort of like,
The challenge, though, is bear in mind that some of the projects they're complaining are pulling them in different directions directly benefit them. This one, Moynihan Station, a brand new terminal, state-of-the-art terminal, being paid for to a large extent by the state of New York. If they, in their prioritization, I do think that they ought to make good on their commitments to the projects where others are doing projects that directly benefit them.
Yeah, but I mean that implies that they have the resources to do so. I mean, you could say we have 500 projects that are going to benefit you, but it doesn't mean they have the resources to do all the staffing that's needed for 500. I mean, that's sort of. I don't really think that logic necessarily holds. In a perfect world, sure, they should help with every project that benefits them, but I mean, I'm gathering that they're lacking the resources to do so.
It's a function of prioritization, you're absolutely right. But as Richard Anderson said, as well as the chairman of Amtrak said to us, we've got to get East Side Access done because before we cannot start doing the East River Tunnel work until East Side Access is open. And so they said it's in their best interest to do everything they can to help us get there.
Right. I think they do think it's in their best interest. I think they have genuine constraints. I don't think they're like willful, lazy people trying to violate a contract.
No one ever said they were willful or lazy.
Well, I feel like that's sort of what's being implied here.
But listen, the good news is that their CEO says there are 5 or 6 things that he wants and intends to do. I guess my point, Polly, and we can agree to disagree, is that all those things are things that could have been done by Amtrak earlier. And
all right,
now,
well, I guess they don't, they would say there are a lot of things this agency should have been doing.
All right.
So,
All right,
I don't know if all the blame should fall on them. I mean, this project's now $1 billion over even its last big price increase.
How much of the Amtrak infrastructure has the MTA paid for?
Well, again, our estimate of what we're doing in Harold interlocking that benefits Amtrak is about $1.5 billion. Sure.
And maybe you're about to get there, but do we have a quantifiable picture of our dependency on Amtrak going forward? Because the fight for what has already happened is going to be the fight for what already happened. But do we understand that risk going forward and have strategies to either accept it and understand that maybe there is no mitigation for a certain element, or have thought through what mitigations we can put in place for the fact that they may not be able to deliver on what they committed?
We certainly had a lot of discussions with the contractor about how to sequence their work in a way that is giving the most chance that we can deliver we will be able to get the Amtrak resources. So every time we do end up resequencing work, and frequently what happens is because work can't get done in a particular contract, it gets thrown into another contract, which itself is a cause of delay and cost increase. But we do try to thoughtfully sequence work so that we can take account of Amtrak's limitations, I would say. I mean, how we're doing that going forward is it becomes less of an issue because we have a smaller scope going forward in Harold interlocking. We have only one major contract left to get underway. But it is part of our strategy to try to limit our exposure to that issue, absolutely.
And then a follow-on. So just as I try and frame my own head around blame of Amtrak and where that might go or not go, I think I heard you say something, but I want to make sure I heard it right. Is their position on delivering some of these resources, well, we thought we were going to be delivering those linemen, for instance, in a different calendar window that was much earlier, and by the time you came around to ask for them, we no longer had them available? Did I hear?
It's a version of that. I respond to that as, honestly, we all have to get past this and start to work with Amtrak. There's no question. But when they say that, I have the old phrase about blaming the victim comes to mind. The reason a lot of this work has dragged out, it's not the only reason. I was about to segue to the section of this presentation where I talk about our own failures more directly. But the reason we have lost a lot of time in Harold is attributable to this resource issue. So when they say, well, we thought it was all going to be done, yeah, but you guys are the ones in large part who helped us to drag it out.
Okay. All right.
So how about we have Amtrak come in and testify? Because I feel like of anything that this board has sort of dealt with that's had a financial implication to it, East Side Access stands alone. It's a project that started at $6 billion and is now, what is it now?
11.
11. And a new billion just emerging since the last time I think we had any serious discussion about it. And, you know, we now have board committees looking at a bunch of different things, at pensions, at accessoride, at procurement. It seems like the working relationship with Amtrak is up there in terms of the implications for the finishing of this project and the bottom line of this agency. And, yeah.
One step further, I think. Jamie asked a question about when this is all done, what is our total interaction and involvement with Amtrak? And it goes beyond East Side Access. I think we have to, I think for the board to fully understand that, you know, once the Long Island Railroad hits the end of Long Island and Queens, it then goes on to tracks that are track and tunnel that's owned and run and managed by Amtrak. So they need to know that. Once it then leaves Penn Station and goes on to the yard, that's ours. The MTA's, excuse me. When you look at Metro North operating-wise, separate from East, you know, anything to do with, you know, the Grand Central Terminal, but once you get to 125th Street, once you get beyond 125th Street on the New Haven line, then it's Amtrak. And then after you hit the Connecticut border, then it's the state of Connecticut. Whereas, you know, the Harlem line and the Hudson line are owned by us, Harlem line all the way to the end, and then the Hudson line, I believe, to Poughkeepsie, but someone from Metro North, Poughkeepsie, is where it ends, and at which point. What?
Well, Long Island Railroad, east of Harold, is not owned by Amtrak, and Metro North.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I said. That's what I said. Right. No, but that's what I said. But no, it's before the New Rochelle joint. It's before the New Rochelle joint. That's Amtrak. That's not ours, but it's Amtrak. I mean, once you hit the Bronx, basically, I mean, you know, as you're going through, even up through Pelham Bay, that's not owned by Metro North.
Of course, I'm talking about the Harlem line.
Harlem is 100% ours.
Yeah.
It's Harlem is 100% ours. But be that as it may, I think it's well worth it to provide the board an idea of all of the interaction that we have with Amtrak. I think it's very, very critical to have. And I think as a subset of that, all of us up and down the East Coast, whether it's SEPTA in Philadelphia, in the Metro Philadelphia area, or MBTA in the Boston area, all of the interactions that they also have, because they also have projects that are going on now, and which goes to the heart of it. But I would like to say that as Jano goes through this presentation, it's not we are not blaming or 100% blaming Amtrak. It never was our intention. And I think that looking at a letter that we sent to Amtrak is specifically that. But give Jano an opportunity to finish his presentation to tell all of us exactly what we've done wrong too.
No, that's fine, and I appreciate that. And I think Jano has done a very good and honest look at what's gone wrong here. But as you know, I'm not a lover of bashing Amtrak. I think it feels a little red meatish and not problem solving. And I would rather, and I would even volunteer for this, I would rather that the board in some way, shape, or form could have a forum in which we could hear from them too, and we could problem solve and not bash them in absentia, because I don't think that's useful. I've got a whole stack of correspondence from both agencies, you know, this goes back a long way, a lot of twists and turns to the tail, you know, many years of this kind of stuff. So rather than sort of go there, wouldn't it be better to like get fruitful going forward?
Yeah, that's the reason why we've sat down with them and have gone forward with them and have toned down our approach.
Well, that's a good segue, because, okay. Well, we started to talk about, we have a quarterly steering committee with the leadership of Amtrak that was purposed at talking about just East Side Access. That's the forum where I actually started to raise some of these questions a while ago. We were going to try to make that more frequent. There is constant staff level interaction, literally weekly. We give them a weekly report. We sit down with them, a biweekly review of performance. There's a monthly plan. There's an annual plan. But I think it does make a difference, especially in light of the commitments that Anderson, the new CEO, made in the most recent meeting for us to increase the frequency of that executive level meeting. We do have, we took over the regional schedule for all the projects because we wanted to create a process that was, East Side Access, that was getting all the projects on one schedule. Believe it or not, this didn't exist before, and that process is working well. Actually, we continue to solve problems in the spirit of what Polly's saying, at least with respect to outages, making sure everybody can get the outages. The problem happens when we don't get the staffing that allows us to get work done. We have, Polly's obviously looked at the letters that we've sent. We are asking Amtrak to, participate in the financial consequences, at least as I see them, of what's happened, and that would go to, what we've asked for initially is that they take responsibility for paying the cost of some of the additional force account work we think has been necessitated their workforce by some of what's happened. And we've let them know that you made a reference to the sort of the bypass stuff. This is work that is not part of East Side Access that Amtrak got us to agree to do at the same time. It was delayed, at least in our view, because we couldn't support it with Amtrak resources, and now we're asking them to share the cost of the increased cost because that work has been delayed. It's not preconditioned to revenue service at Grand Central and East Side Access. So those are 4 steps that we're taking, and I think that some of Commissioner Trottenberg's suggestions about direct dialogue with Amtrak and among all of us are useful. So the segue that I was trying to make was to what did we do wrong? And the answer is a lot. A couple things that we did that harmed the project when we were doing the right thing. One of them was that there was after you approved a replan in 14, there was a full redesign of the signal system because we adopted the predecessor to civil speed enforcement, the predecessor to PTC. So we were in the midst of literally cutting over the new signal system in Harold, and that had to be redone. But I don't want to. Well,
could you let me hear the rest of that? So what happened was in 14, we were implementing the system that we had designed for the project. Then PTC came into play, so we had to redesign the signal system to include PTC.
So go ahead, Bill.
Or did I miss something?
No, the system was designed at that time to accommodate PTC, positive train control. There was no interim step planned to do civil speed enforcement. When there was a policy decision in 2014 to do that as an interim measure, we had to insert that into the signal design process. So that required quite a bit of redesign of the signals for Herald to accommodate that.
So in the end, we get a signal system that has both parts,
That's correct. In the interim, it operates with civil speed enforcement.
which it is doing now.
Today.
Which it is
Correct.
doing now
Yes,
to provide additional safety for Long Island Railroad customers, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
And
And
then,
then-
as positive train control gets put into effect by Long Island Railroad and their integrator, it will be incorporated into the same signal huts in Herald.
And part of that cost differential with including the interim safety measures is part of the increased cost?
It's embedded in the cost of the contract of our project. Yes.
So, but I mean, it's above the 14 estimate and now included in the 18 estimate.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's one episode, but more broadly, we had overbids, significant contracts that were, and this is, the reality. We had significant contracts that didn't come in at the numbers that had been projected. In one episode, and we discussed it a little bit with some of your colleagues, there was the concourse contract for the whole concourse in Grand Central had only one. There was competition at the general contractor level, but there was only one electrical contractor who was willing to work on it, and he was bidding it with all of the different competitors. And lo and behold, there was $40 million of extra cost as a result of that. There were in the concourse, which should be simple work because it's mostly civil work. There's a terrible story about bad decisions about surveying long ago, leading to a whole mess of redesign of the steel because they didn't have accurate drawings of the condition of the Madison yard where the concourse is being built. And that was a decision because it was an operating yard and people didn't want to go in and wait, this is long ago. But the consequence is you had bad steel design. The contractor was also at fault because they were supposed to validate a lot of the dimensions. And lo and behold, we had literally hundreds of steel clashes, which have only now in the last month or two been turned into change orders and corrections. We negotiated those out. That is the package of roughly 60 change orders, small change orders that you approved today that dealt with those steel clashes. So there are issues of management and decision-making that certainly we are responsible for as well, and I don't want to underplay those in any way. Schedule going forward. The blue is the 2014 schedule, and the yellow is the the current schedule. Every single element of the project has been pushed out. The concourse in Grand Central, the tracks, and the terminal itself, which is the lower level of the facility, and the tracks going out to Queens, the midday storage yard in Harold interlocking, where in addition to the schedule, there was cost increase because there were design changes that we initiated late in the process. All of those things have been pushed out, and systems, most of all, which is the greatest risk. Notwithstanding that, because there was a fair amount of cushion in the old schedule, I think that we can and should keep the 2022 date, acknowledging, however, that we've lost significant schedule contingency. We've gone from 22 months of schedule contingency to 10 now. So this is not a gimme, but I think we can and should continue pushing towards the 2022 opening date. It's achievable, and we've got to redouble our efforts. As I said, I think we are all committed to maintaining the schedule and opening date, but the schedule's not, the budget is not going to hold. I'm going to go through it by item. Some of you have heard this, but I think it bears repeating. The third-party construction costs, that's the actual contracts, are going up by 6.5%. That is about $80 million of overbids that I referred to before, but much more of it is additional contingency to solve the problems that some of which I've talked to you about. So whereas in a normal project at this stage you would dial the contingency back because we've got so much of the work done and we have fewer contracts to bid and all of those risks have been attenuated over time. Now I'm saying we got to keep a 20% schedule contingency, budget contingency, because this work still has risks associated with it. The design problems that we've had, the interfaces between the contracts, all of those things need contingency to be dealt with. For its account, we've debated a little bit about Amtrak, but both Amtrak and the Long Island Railroad, as a result of the extension of time of construction, and we can argue about why that happened, but because you're building a lot longer, you have more force account, more need for support from Amtrak and Long Island Railroad, and that's causing a $200 million increase in costs. Soft costs, this is all the overheads, the design team that has to respond to change orders and supervise work, all of the overheads for our own consultants and our own staff and our offices and everything. All of this is driven, again, by extensions of time of construction, but it's a significant number, $300 million in additional costs. Insurance is an ugly story where we're both building for longer, so we need longer, huge insurance, but also the market is responding to the New York's unique labor law situation, which is exposes owners of major construction projects to a lot more risk than maybe in other states. By decreasing competition, we were forced to extend the OSIP, the so-called wrap-up insurance program, and we got killed on it. This is our risk management group, and it's $175 million more as a result of those extensions of time and those market conditions. And then finally, unallocated contingency. This is contingency for the non-construction work, but also unknown risks that you can't identify as we sit here. I've maintained that at 9.5%. It's the same percentage basis as in 2014. But the significance is, again, normally in a project at this stage of completion, you would dial the contingency down. I'm not doing that. And the result is you have a significant additional contingency. It all rolls up to an increase of $955 million over the 2014 estimate. I did this at your request because I think we all felt we needed to refresh it. None of this is good news. And, I don't want to pretend otherwise, but I do need to underscore that I started out looking at this project as in some ways, a nice to have. Convenient for commuters to go to Grand Central if they worked on the east side. As I've gotten into it since I joined up 10 months ago, I've become convinced it's a gotta have because you need the redundancy across the East River. You need this project to provide you the ability to increase capacity in the Long Island Railroad peak hour by 45%. That is a significant increase that will only be possible when we have a new 8-track terminal at Grand Central as well as slots at Penn Station. You need this project in order for the Metro North Penn project to happen because then they can use some of those slots in Penn Station. We need this project because it will allow New York commuters to get to JFK and literally be in a terminal from Grand Central in 30 minutes. And frankly, reverse commuters who cannot use Long Island Railroad in a regular way right now to go to Long Island for good jobs there. So this project has grown, in my estimate, in terms of importance. I'm glad we are where we are instead of where Gateway is, but I can't tell you that there isn't a lot of disappointment coming out of this review in terms of the budget impact.
I understand everything you've reported. And I appreciate the mention of Penn Access as an important project. Now, the commitment going back has been we flipped the light switch on East Side Access. At the very same time, we flipped the light switch on Penn Access. Is anywhere realistically near happening?
Where this project, where Penn Access is right now, we need to negotiate, we need to design the project to whatever degree. I think many of us are hoping it's going to be a design build, but design needs to go forward. We need to have an agreement with Amtrak about how this project is going to be built and be funded and what work they're going to require us to do. We've gone through some of the issues and how they'll support this project, and we need to get the construction work done. I can't sit here and tell you that I'm certain that it will be done at the minute East Side Access opens. But we're certainly, continues to be our mission. It's just that we have a lot of hills to climb in order to accomplish it.
Reminds me of an old adage about when you have bad news to impart, you always start with the cat's on the roof. You've heard that story before. You're telling me the cat's on the roof. That's a problem, and I think the committee also needs to know what the specific impediments are with our own organization and with Amtrak, what they are requiring us to build, as in East Side Access, that has nothing to do with our service. What are they requiring us to do? What will it cost? What's the nature of our agreements with them, if we have any, at this point? I mean, all I'm hearing is they're saying, yeah, we'll do it, but I'm not seeing any agreements reported, and that's troublesome.
Follow up on what Freddie just said. If East Side Access were to open and there became available slots in Penn Station due to us sending some Long Island trains to Grand Central, are we assured by Amtrak that those slots would be reserved for the Metro North Bronx line once it starts, or would those slots possibly be filled by New Jersey Transit or Amtrak themselves?
Honestly, there isn't an agreement that exists. There's been a very clear understanding that was, everybody's expectations. We were going to move some slots out of Penn Station, and that they would have to be filled by, obviously our own MTA services.
If just so you know, if we still reserve the right to those spots, whether we use them or not, the idea that they'll give them away to New Jersey Transit, it's not realistic. Jamie first.
Yeah. So, John, we're a number of those benefits that you mentioned, it strikes me, reverse commuting, for instance, requires third track to ultimately avail yourself of those benefits. And look, this thing has run away in time and dollars. It preceded, I think, most people here, the inception of these projects, and we're just dealing with the hand that we're dealt and trying to bring it to the most successful conclusion we can. I think there's a lot of good arguments that this is a 100 or 200 year project, and despite these cost overruns and time overruns, this is going to pay dividends for a long time. And I think the people of Long Island should have this project. But I do think it's incumbent on us to try and understand with real precision what went wrong, so that particularly on third track, we don't end up in the same situation. You clearly have some things here that I have no doubt you're transferring to that. You seem to have a good handle at a granular level of what's driving these cost overruns. But I would do everything from between implore, beg, and insist that we really understand at a granular level what we can transfer to third track to not end up there with a similar level of order of magnitude of cost and time overrun, because it really is crippling. I mean, we talk $1 billion is just so significant, and it's crippling if that happens on third track.
So I probably should have mentioned at the outset that the impact, and you're going to hear this from Don, is in the current program there is no net impact in terms of cost to the current program. 800 million of the 955 is in the next impacts on the next program, which is not to say it's not.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not significant, but it just for present purposes, I needed to make that clear, and I didn't until now. Look, your point is absolutely right. There are a couple of things we're doing. We're not going to get into it. One is design. Third track is design build. Two is there was an intense focus on how to allocate risk in a way that would minimize exposure going forward between the contractor and get the best price. So between the contractor and the government. So we spent a lot of time worrying about the utilities and outages and access and all those things that have bedeviled this project, East Side Access. We focused on intensely. And then we also did a lot of planning about the logistics of work and how many outages they could get and where they would work. All of those things designed to do exactly what I believe you're hoping, which is to learn from what went wrong on East Side Access and do better the next time.
And we don't have on third track, is this correct, Amtrak dependencies?
No, it's outside.
Okay.
Thank you. On the signal issue in Harold, this cutover is supposed to be this summer, correct? I'm just a little bit confused about what you said about positive train control and civil speed enforcement. Originally, as I understand it, 2014, we were ready to go. The signal design was done, but it had to be modified because we wanted to add civil speed enforcement, which is supposed to be part of the PTC package, right? No? Well, not for the railroad already has civil speed enforcement. I know that, and the other thing was confusing to me was I thought Harold did have some civil speed enforcement through the cab signaling system. So I don't know what I'm a little bit confused about what the need for the change was.
The best of my knowledge, they did not have civil speed enforcement. Certainly didn't have it in the signal huts, and we had to add that into the signal design. In fact, if you remember back in the fall of 2014, we installed the H4 CIL hut without civil speed enforcement. We had to come back later and install civil speed enforcement in that.
Okay, but right now we have civil speed enforcement in Harold, or we will this summer?
In the new signal huts, H4 as well as H4 is the only one right now.
Okay.
The ones we're cutting over this summer, which is the end of June, first part of July, they will all have civil speed enforcement.
So we have in some sections we do right now, but by this summer everything will have civil speed
Right.
enforcement.
Only the areas controlled by Signal Hut H4 right now have it.
Okay.
So it's
All right.
partial. It'll be full after the second cutover in July.
As required by PTC, that level of civil speed enforcement.
Well, I can't speak for PTC. We're doing this as an interim step. Once PTC is in place, it essentially negates the need for civil speed enforcement.
Right, because it offers...
It overrides it.
It overrides it. I see. Okay, but we're supposed to have PTC by next year. So this redesign and the way I'm seeing it, I'm sorry, is that this redesign was good for maybe 6 months? Gave us a 6-month jump?
The intent,
In the end?
The intent when we started down this road was to have civil speed enforcement in advance as an interim measure for positive train control. Because of the delays that have occurred, it's taken this long to get to a position where we could actually incorporate them.
Separately, on Amtrak, I mean, I think everybody here, well, the board members should know, we're married to Amtrak. There's no turning back. There's no divorce either. So what happened in the past, and I'm certainly someone who has voiced my displeasure at Amtrak, not just with this project, but also the operations at Penn Station. We have an operating agreement with them, which I think is pretty clear about how much space we have at Penn Station, and we're going to stick to that. But I think the fact that we're married to them, everyone here should be very cognizant of, and we're going to have to work with them. We have no choice, and going forward. And I know, but we also have to be real and open about our relationship with Amtrak and what has happened. And I'm very concerned about what will happen in the future, because there's been changes of, I've heard this since I've been on the board, this particular project with problems with Amtrak and at Harold. And I'm not confident that we're going to be able to keep to this 2022 schedule, somewhat because of that. The other issue is I'm happy you're getting ahead on the systems, because anytime we do a systems installation here, a simple thing, just a new signal system, it does not happen on time. There's always a software issue, and when we're combining all those things together, I can't imagine there won't be. So good luck to you, and I hope that, because looking at that chart, I'm nervous about it.
And I don't disagree with you. I'd say that we are married to Amtrak, but I really want to go into therapy, because some of us
Yes,
change our behavior.
That would be helpful.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off on behalf of the people of Long Island in thanking Jano and Bill and his staff for putting together a very, very thorough evaluation of what is clearly the most important project affecting Long Island. We are in debt to a lot of people, a lot of entities, but we're clearly in debt to the both of you and your staffs for laying out, hopefully, a final schedule and a final cost estimate as to what it's going to take to get us to December of 2022. As you and I have talked many times, in my opinion, the December 22 date is sacrosanct to some degree. It is essential not only for the people of Long Island to allow them to get the Grand Central, but because of its relationship to a number of other projects, including second track, third track, Penn Access, and a variety of other things that we are trying to accomplish for both improved transportation system and for redundancy. So we have options if things happen. Clearly, one of the things that are going to happen, and going to happen soon to some degree, are the replacements or the rehabilitation, whatever word we want to call it, for the East River tunnels. We all understand the East River tunnels are in dire need of improvements, rehabilitation. That has not yet happened, absent small incremental changes by Amtrak, its owner, and those impacts are going to significantly negatively affect Long Island Railroad service at some time. Whether that time is before December of 2022 or after December 2022, it's going to happen. And this agency has to be prepared for those effects in addition to the other effects. The other thing I'm concerned about is, and as I understand Jamie's point about using some of these best practices and learned issues on third track, I'm not so concerned about what the effect is going to be on third track. I'm concerned what the effect is going to be on Penn Station Access. Because in Penn Station Access, we are as married to Amtrak as we are in East Side Access. They're the owner of the track. They're the owner of the bridge. They're the owner of lots of other things in that relationship. And so while those don't exist on third track, because on third track we own all the property. So I am very concerned that if we do not settle all of these outstanding issues now with Amtrak, and I'm more than happy to settle them in a positive way. We've all been through this. For many of us who have been on this board for many years, we've been on, sat here and gone through many reports about delays and the reasons for them. And in April of 2018, they basically have now become irrelevant. We can't go backwards. All we can do is now go forwards. And I'm hoping, perhaps with the help of Commissioner Trottenberg and others, and I'm more than happy to provide whatever help I can do as chairman of the Long Island Committee. It is necessary to sit down with Amtrak and decide from April of 18 to December of 2022 and beyond, if that's what it takes to get Penn Station access. How are we going to make this happen? Because we've provided a lot of benefits to Amtrak, and understandably so. It's their property. They've provided a lot of benefits to us, and in relation to their improvements they're making in the tracks in Penn Station, albeit we would all agree a little late, but better late than never. And so our relationship with them is, you know, somebody said before, it's a marriage. It's a marriage for a long time. It's a marriage without a divorce mechanism, and it's a marriage that is going to continue to have its ups and downs. I'm sure hopeful it has a lot more ups and downs on these two major projects because we are tied to them, and not just the Long Island people, but the Metro North people in that regard. So, you know, we need to figure this out now, because we don't want anyone coming back next year and saying, you know what, we now got to change the schedule because Amtrak didn't do this, or we didn't do that, or whatever. We just need to go forward in that regard. So I commend Commissioner Trottenberg for putting these issues on the table. I'm hopeful we can reflect them, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Jano and Bill and your staff for laying out finally, hopefully, the final schedule, the final costs, and letting the Long Island residents see what's at the end, and letting the Metro North residents see what they're going to get when Long Island gets to the end. That is a very important conduit here, and something which I hope this committee can continue to react to, and react to positively as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And the residents of the Bronx should be grateful for the opportunity to share some of the travails of Penn Station with Mr. Pally and his neighbors. We're looking forward to bunking in with you.
From the IEC on the East Side Access Project?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to make one summary comment. While there's been a lot here said about what has gotten us, what's gotten us to where we are today in the past, we like to look forward, and we have find that the project in planning its future work for the remaining construction that has to go on, as well as the implementation of the incremental system, integrated system testing, we're finding that they're taking the correct steps to get this done. The IC, as is our role, will look closely at the project. We will monitor it for its performance going forward, and we'll report back on how it measures up in the upcoming future CPOC meetings. So I'll turn it over to Darlene to go through the bulk of the report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. MTACC and the project team have put in a significant amount of work to develop strategies to drive the project closer to achieving revenue service. These efforts include a revised estimated completion, as well as several enhancements to the management structure and improvements to the project schedule. The IEC has performed a preliminary review on the project's revised cost estimate and finds that reasonable efforts have been made to quantify the cost impacts to date and to establish a realistic forecast for the remaining work that supports the December 22 revenue service. Contingencies that are in the revised plan reduce the risk of greater than anticipated impacts to third-party and soft costs. Where? That's not the right slide. We're on schedule. Yeah, we're on schedule. Sorry. Okay. In previous reports to CPOC, the IEC forecasted the Manhattan Systems was the critical path, and now the new project schedule confirms it. In the opinion of the IEC, MTACC's new incremental testing approach holds promise for the successful mitigation of existing delays to achieve revenue service by December 2022. This approach is a significant improvement, noting that if the project had continued with the original approach, most of the program contingency would have been consumed. The new project schedule, which reflects the incremental testing approach, incorporates the individual contractor schedules, captures logic between the contracts, and considers potential impacts due to the outstanding issues. Issues identified in the new project schedule are currently being addressed, and the IEC will perform a quantitative assessment of the new approach and its inherent risks once a detailed incremental test plan and refined project schedule are fully developed. With respect to the remaining work in Harold required for revenue service, the central instrumentation locations are now 2 months delayed. Any further delays to these cutovers would impact the subsequent Northeast Quadrant, Southeast Quadrant, and BC track reconfiguration work. Extended outages and force account resources needed to perform the Southeast Quadrant work and the BC tunnel track reconfiguration work have yet to be secured. The allocation of force account resources to the East Side project for both Amtrak and Long Island Railroad may be hindered by competing projects such as Penn Station rehabilitation, Moynihan, Mainline double track, and positive train control, all of which are currently being addressed in the regional master schedule. The IEC recognized the revised organization will most likely enhance management of the project. Considering the complexities and challenges presented earlier by MTACC, a separate executive designated to systems program area would further strengthen the management efforts for the remaining system installation, testing, and commissioning work. The IEC supports the effort to integrate Long Island Railroad management to assume a co-leadership role in rail activation on the East Side Access Project, which should strengthen Long Island Railroad readiness for opening day operations. Since the issuance of the revised contract modification procedure in December 2017, which increases the amount to $250,000 the project change manager can negotiate to, the IEC observes a reduction in the number of outstanding issues related to change orders. With the creation of the Change Management Group, as described earlier by MTACC, it is expected that the change order backlog will be further reduced. The IEC recommends the following to help ensure completion of the work required for revenue service. As mentioned earlier, appoint a separate executive for the systems program area. Perform a systems risk assessment and identify mitigations based on the incremental testing approach. Reestablish key performance indicators and other metrics for revised cost and schedule. Manage in-house force account to balance resources between East Side Access and other projects. MTACC has indicated they are accepting of these recommendations, and the IEC will monitor the implementation going forward. This concludes the independent engineer's report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the independent engineer? There being none, thank you. We now move on to the New York City Transit Capital Program update. First, it's a progress report on signals and train control. Robert Gomez.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Gomez. I will be briefing you on various signal projects on signals and CBTC today.
Janet.
We continue to advance our signals program. Even with the high volume of work going on, we continue to make good progress. Today I will discuss the status of some of these currently underway. First project is the Flushing project, Flushing CBTC. The Flushing CBTC project was awarded to Thales in June of 2010. This project overlays a new CBTC system on the Flushing line from Main Street to 34th Street Hudson Yards Terminal and modernizes two interlockings, First Avenue and Times Square. First Avenue was modernized with a new solid-state interlocking. This contract also equips 46 11-car trains with CBTC equipment. This was a great job done by our Corona shop team. The project is 92% complete. On the schedule, Thales has submitted a revised completion date. However, New York City Transit has not accepted this new date, and the proposed schedule is under review as we're exploring opportunities to advance the date. The current budget is $588 million. Since the last update, we have been operating CBTC from Main Street to 74th Street during the off-peak hours, weekends, and on a limited basis during the morning and evening rush hours. All train operator training is completed, and refresher classes are being provided as needed. Hardware and software issues identified last year, which were affecting the system operation, have been addressed and corrected through a series of software releases. However, various communication and software issues whose root cause Thales is investigating are still keeping the system from reaching a high level of performance. These issues, which can cause break application and impact service, will be addressed through upcoming software releases. In addition, issues with the ATS system performance will be addressed as well. New York City Transit is exploring conducting a detailed review and assessment of the Flushing CBTC communication network. Over the next 6 months, we will complete monitoring software stability from Main Street to 74th, and we will complete CBTC testing from 74th to 34th Street Hudson Yards. We will continue aggressively working with Thales to identify and resolve issues, and we will complete CBTC in service of 74th to 34th Street Hudson Yards and provide full CBTC revenue operation on the line. This graphic shows Thales's projected cutover dates for CBTC. The line segment on the right, Main Street to 74th Street, is where we conduct the CBTC testing with a full fallback signal system to ensure no impact to service. As previously reported, Thales's plan was to place this line segment in full CBTC operation in the first quarter. CBTC was then to be going in service on the rest of the line by the end of the second quarter after a system stability monitoring period. The stability is not only a safety and technical criteria, but also a requirement to achieve a high level of system performance. Due to continuing instability in the Thales CBTC system and the need to have additional software releases to address these issues, Thales is requesting to extend the in-service into the fourth quarter. We're working very hard with Thales to address these issues and exploring opportunities to advance the date. There are 4 critical issues which we are closely monitoring. Hardware issues previously identified have been mitigated and will not impact the CBTC in-service. CBTC software stability is our top requirement. Multiple software releases have corrected many issues, but there are still software issues preventing the system from achieving the high level of performance needed for the Flushing line. Thales is planning a series of software releases to address the outstanding issues. Completing the system stability period and achieving in-service performance metrics are necessary prior to the start of commissioning. General orders, access, and support are needed to place the system in service. We are coordinating with various departments to ensure the required services will be provided to support the plan. CBTC,
Sir,
sorry.
how confident are you that, because the date has changed several times now, thanks to Thales, how confident are you that fourth quarter 2018 is when the full CBTC 7-line project will be turned on?
Shall I answer that?
I'm not that confident at the moment, if I'm honest. I also haven't accepted their new date of the fourth quarter, which you might think is sort of counterintuitive, because the longer the date, in theory, the more your confidence will grow. But I'm starting at this initially by just saying to Thales, no, that may be your revised date, that's not my revised date. You've had long enough at this, it's slipped and slipped and slipped. Absolutely, we want reliability. They have got to up their game, they've got to provide more resource, they've got to provide more quality resource. I put that back to them. I'm dealing with them at CEO level, and they are outstanding a response back to me. But right now, I'm not that confident, and that's pretty much all I can say.
Of course, that's the same company we're using for Queens Boulevard CBTC.
I've made it very clear to them that they need to get Line 7 in by the summer, working properly, and that their reputation will be judged upon their ability to do that, and that that has big implications for other projects, and I'll say no more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just something that's not all that important, but on this strip map that you have up there, 50th Street on the 8th Avenue line is in the wrong place. It should be around the curve. It's not at 53rd Street like 7th Avenue is, so it should be moved around the curve further south.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't going to say this facetiously at all, but is there a way we can blame Amtrak for this too?
Not at all. There's not a, no.
Jano left, it's okay.
Okay, CBTC on the Queens Boulevard line. The CBTC Queens Boulevard project consists of two phases. The first phase is the design and furnishing of two interoperable CBTC systems, and the second phase is the installation and commissioning of the system. The first phase of this project was awarded to two suppliers to provide interoperable system. These contracts were awarded to Siemens and Thales in August of 2015. Under these contracts, CBTC will be deployed on the E, F, M, and R lines as shown on the map. A total of 309 R160 units will be equipped with car-borne CBTC equipment. The contract is 42% complete and progressing well. The contract is on schedule and within budget. Substantial progress has been achieved. Delivery of CBTC wayside and car-borne equipment is 24% complete. Siemens and Thales have completed 60% of their factory integration tests, and the CBTC test track at Jamaica Yard was completed. In the next 6 months, we'll begin upgrading the integrated test facility here at 2 Broadway. We'll complete test tracks at Coney Island Yard and East New York Yards, and we'll complete environmental qualification tests of the Thales car-borne equipment. There are 3 major milestones we're tracking. Critical verification of interoperability between the Siemens and Thales system will begin in July. This is a very critical step leading us into the field testing. We will begin train operator training by the end of the year in anticipation of our first intermediate cutover. And we're equipping all the trains by June of 2020. This work is being performed by the Division of Car Equipment in close cooperation with Siemens and Thales. The installation is on schedule, and we're exploring additional opportunities to improve the installation, including incorporating into our car maintenance or in-car overhaul shop process.
Phase 2. Let me ask the board members, since this material has been given out to you prior to this, and I'm going to make the assumption that it's all been read, but do you have any questions, or do we need to go through this line by line, and any questions that we can ask of Robert, and if not, then move on to the IEC. Right.
I was just going to ask, what relationship, if any, does the contractors' work on the 7 line have on their work on the Queens Boulevard line?
Mark's here.
So, doesn't really necessarily affect one another. The project team on Flushing is not working. It's a different team than is working on the QBL. So that's the only overlap between the two projects. Other than some hindrance when we have a shutdown on the line, it may impact the operation.
But are there? I didn't mean it from an issue of resources. I meant it from an issue of knowledge. Are there things they are learning? Because obviously, the number 7 line has taken a substantial period of time, much longer than I think anybody thought, and much longer than anybody hoped. So obviously, we would assume that the contractor has learned some things, we would hope, and is continuing to learn things as they are being installed. So what impact has that had on the Queens Boulevard operation or schedule in regard to the interoperability?
So we are transferring knowledge from the Flushing line, excuse me, to the Queens Boulevard line. The thing to just understand is on the Queens Boulevard line, Thales has a very small percentage of the CBTC installation and the CBTC equipment. The vast majority is provided by Siemens. So Siemens is the same company that supplied the CBTC that's been in service for about 10 years now on the Canarsie line. So we've transferred knowledge from both the Canarsie line as well as the Flushing line installation to both Siemens and Thales, and we're implementing the CBTC on QBL based on a lot of the lessons learned on both Canarsie and Flushing.
I'm afraid to ask the question, but I'll ask it anyway. How long did the installation on the Canarsie line take?
The project, roughly about 7 years.
So the time period between the time the implementation on Canarsie and the implementation on the number 7 line is about the same, give or take, notwithstanding the fact that they're 2 different contractors.
Yes.
So are we to assume, therefore, that a normal installation period on anything going forward is the same period of time?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
When we put the corporate plan out next month, there's no way we can carry on having these individual schemes taking as long as they do, and in series. We must parallel activity, and we must get quicker at it, and it must be infinitely, exponentially more reliable. So that's the work we're doing behind the scenes to present to you a compelling corporate plan that will show how we can absolutely speed this up to the point that we can get a fair percentage of the subway re-signaled under CBTC and/or ultra-wideband or another technology within 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Probably a bit more than that, 10 to 12, but certainly a large percentage. We simply have to find a way.
But certainly not 7 years for
No
each
way.
line.
No, and you know what? I've seen it done elsewhere. It doesn't take this long. So there are ways that we can expedite this, and I'm discussing that with my team on a regular basis about wherever possible, buying, not customizing things, keeping them simple, buying a known product and overlaying it into New York. Now, sometimes New York has some idiosyncrasies, but I passionately believe that you've got to keep it simple. You've got to avoid customization, and you should absolutely minimize interfaces. So you don't want too many contractors. So there are lessons that we can apply, and we're having an active debate within the team, and credit to them. They're absolutely all ears about this, and that will form the backbone, the anchor of this corporate plan, which you'll see in, 5 weeks' time.
Okay. Thank you.
Frequent weekend GOs that are occurring on the 7 line, is that for CBTC or for something else?
Let's have it both.
Well, so you guys answer. It's both, really.
It's both. There's some major track work that's going on, and we're also doing a lot of testing.
Because it's basically Hudson Yards to Queensboro Plaza that's shut.
Yes.
And that's basically for CBTC installation or testing?
Yes, and the track work that's going on. Like this past weekend was major track work.
And what I should add is, for full transparency, to add to the answer, Commissioner, is with this challenge I've laid down to Thales, which is it's just simply not good enough. You're not getting away with saying it's going to be Q4. Whatever happens, it will be disruptive to get across the line in summer, if they can indeed do that. We're going to have to be very flexible about closures. They need access, and I want reliability, so we'll have to flex on that.
Of course. The 7 line is particularly a summer line with the Mets and the U.S. Open.
Absolutely understood. Yeah, so we have a challenge ahead of us, shall we say.
There being no further questions, let's go on this topic to the independent engineer, and Nabil.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Nabil Ghali, and I'll be presenting the IEC's report for signals and train control. My presentation this afternoon will be focused on the CPTC program, including Flushing, Queens Boulevard, and interoperability. So with respect to the Flushing line, I would like to start with a summary assessment of project progress and current status. Since our last report to the board in December, the project team did expand CPTC operation between Main Street and 74th Street. However, as Robert indicated, system performance issues and lack of system stability have impacted the project team's ability to expand CPTC operation to the remaining of the line. I will talk more about the performance issues in the next slides. With respect to project schedule, as I indicated, there are system performance issues that are impacting the schedule. Thales has recently submitted a revised schedule, which is being reviewed by NYCT. In December, the project team indicated that all in-service activities will be completed in the second quarter. As Robert indicated, this is no longer achievable. With respect as to when CPTC operation would expand to the entire line, it will depend on system performance within the next 2 weeks and Thales' ability to advance or to resolve some of the issues that are currently impacting performance. With respect to the budget, the project remains within the approved budget, and there are $5 million remaining in reserve. However, the IEC is of the opinion that if in-service activities are delayed further, there may be a need for additional funds for TA supplied services and to carry the project through closeout activities. With respect to IEC observations, as I mentioned in the summary assessment, and as you heard from Robert, progress was made in expanding revenue service and addressing a number of software and hardware issues. However, lack of system stability is impacting further progress, which leads me to the IEC concerns on the next slide. So our main concern is the remaining system issues that are impacting CBTC performance. Basically, there are three system elements that are exhibiting failure. First, intermittent communication failures are causing loss of movement authorities for CBTC trains, and in some cases, they result in unnecessary brake applications. Second, additional design and software changes are required to address some of the operational issues observed during revenue service. And third, the software for automatic train supervision subsystems require updates to address failures that impact the rail control center's ability to monitor and control train service. The IEC is also concerned that in the event of further delays in commissioning activities, it may be challenging to reschedule the required general orders. Because the communication subsystems is a critical element of CBTC, and in view of frequent intermittent failure and no clear root cause for these failures, the IEC is recommending a third-party comprehensive in-depth review of the data communication system design. With respect to project risks, they are mainly related to system performance. First, a delay in the resolution of the system issues that I discussed earlier, or if new issues are identified, this will obviously further impact project schedule. And second, migration south of 74th Street will be especially challenging because the existing wayside signals cannot support service in the event of CBTC failures. This requires a very high level of stability and availability of the CBTC system. Further, the section south of 74th Street is divided into a number of segments that will be placed in CBTC operation sequentially. In the event of an issue, or if the event an issue is identified in a segment, this could delay the commissioning activities in the remaining segments. Next, we'll move to the CBTC.
Nabil, if I can, given the time of day and given the fact that this information has been given to all of the board members, I'm going to do the same thing I just did before and just say, we've gotten the material. Does anybody here have any questions on this particular aspect? And then I've got another question beyond that.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, the way I read this, I thought it implied, or maybe it actually says, that the current operation of CBTC on the Flushing line between Main Street and 74 has actually caused delays in service. I mean, is that's true?
That is correct.
There's been passenger impacts? Because the 7 line is one of the worst now statistically for us. So is that true?
There are interruptions to service because of the failures.
Yes, right. The answer is that absolutely.
Okay, I just, some of the things they said here are very disturbing, the IEC report in particular, and I don't know if, I'm happy to hear from you, President Byford, that you're going to hold their feet to the fire on this, because it's unacceptable. Last question, this contract doesn't have any penalties for late?
Yes, it
production, does it?
It does.
Are they already being implemented? Because it's late beyond.
No penalties as of yet.
When would penalties take effect?
Well, that requires us to resolve the schedule analysis with the contractor on this. There have been a lot of reasons for the delay of this project. I mean, and I'm not, there's no, I mean, I could go through the history of them, but most certainly the biggest delay started with Sandy and other things, and the limited weekends we were able to work.
Okay.
So there's good reasons for why we are where we are. The performance of the contractor is kind of adding into that.
Yeah, I mean, we thought we were going to have it early part of this year, but the delays really were through December of last year. Now I think this is on the contractor, but, okay.
There was concurrent issues also with that Dallas Fields resides with New York City Transit, and we are in the process of talking through them.
Okay.
Andrew?
Nabil, on the IEC, on the page there, it says the overall project remains on schedule. Is that our schedule or Talas's schedule?
We talk about the QBL, that's project schedule. That's both NYCT and Talas, yes.
Okay.
And actually, it's Talas and Siemens, because there are two furnished suppliers there are two suppliers on this project, yeah.
If there are no further questions now for Nabil on the signals and trains, I'm going to do the same thing with the systems and security work, including the bus radio system and the bus command center. Having read all of the material and having seen the reports of the IEC, does anybody on the board have any questions?
One. So the increased number of B division countdown clocks is now awaiting the Outfront advertising contract for them to be installed. Is that a fair statement?
Mark?
Yes. We're still looking at installing additional countdown clocks independent of Outfront, and we're working with IT. There's a team put together to survey stations where additional countdown clocks may be needed. So there's a parallel effort, but we're also waiting for the Outfront initiative to install further ones.
Are we also working to get them more accurate? Because, as you know, between stations, they're now approximating, and you can see it jump from 5 to 2 in no time, and, you know.
Yeah, whenever we get reports are based on our monitoring of the inaccuracy of the countdown clocks, we investigate each one, we try to identify the root cause, and then IT goes back and, if necessary, makes adjustment to the software driving the clocks to address them.
Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner?
Are we contemplating any countdown clocks to be installed at the station entrance?
As part of the Outfront initiative that was just mentioned, they are installing digital urban panels at the station entrance, facing the customer as they walk down the stairs. New York City Transit will own 40% of the real estate on that sign, and we'll be able to put countdown clock information on those signs as well. In addition, we put 2 countdown clocks at stair-level entrances on the Culver line at Avenue X and Ditmas as part of the rehabilitation of those stations, and we've put them at ESI stations as well.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no further questions, let's move on to the capital program status. Ronnie Hakem.
Sure, thank you. The commitments and completion performance highlights through March start on page 109 of the agenda materials. In 2018, agencies plan to commit a total of $7.3 billion, which are 43 major commitments that will track throughout the year. Through March, we've made 7 major commitments. Through March, the agencies committed $1.7 billion versus $1.4 billion year-to-date goal, having advanced 2 additional project awards, and by year-end, they anticipate making the 2018 commitment goal. In terms of completions through March, agencies plan a total of $6.3 billion in completions, which include 39 major completions that will be tracked in this committee. The MTA has already achieved 1 major commitment. 1 is delayed but is expected to be achieved this year, so that by year end we forecast meeting or exceeding our completions goal. And that concludes my report.
Are there any other questions, comments, or additions on the part of the board? And asking any questions? There being none, I'll move for adjournment. Thank you. Audit Committee, 2 minutes.